Greetings, salutations, respect, and love. I am Scott. You are in the Prog Corner. Oh, today, in case and a lot of people just watch, right? A lot of people listen. Sometimes they're not looking at their screen. We've got Andy Edwards with us today. A big day in the Prog Corner. Andy, thank you for joining us. How you doing over there?
Oh, I'm feeling rough.
Yeah.
I've got the lurgy. We call it the lurgy here in the UK. I've got the rotten lurgy.
That doesn't
so I'm going to try my best.
Sounds terrible, Even the name sounds gross. And we're hoping to get Jim Newstead on, and look who just popped into the green room right on time. How you doing, Jim? Can you hear us okay?
I can certainly hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. We're good to go. We're good to go.
Perfect.
Boys and girls. Oh my goodness. It seems preposterous, right? All the comments that I was getting when I was posting this episode on my socials, the US versus the UK. One person commented, shortest episode ever. At first blush, I give it to you. 8 out of my 10 favorite bands of all time are from the UK. So I get it. It sounds like the deck is stacked, but me and Scott are here to defend our beloved United States of America against this British onslaught of greatness. I think we've got enough receipts to do it. I think we can fend you off. I don't think it's a slam dunk whatsoever. What says you, Andy Edwards?
You're not going to throw Kansas at me, are you?
Absolutely.
Kansas. That's the best you've got.
That's all they've got. That's all they've got.
I've just kicked it from under you. And then when they're desperate, crack the sky. Crack the bloody sky, and that's it. Against King Crimson, Van der Graaf Generator, Genesis.
And the last good album they released was when?
Uh-oh.
What are you talking about? Crack the Sky? They only did 2, didn't they?
I think they've got like half a dozen or more, actually.
Nobody would know because nobody really ever listened to them, did they?
After the first album, yeah.
Because they're an American prog band.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling well, and this is what I'm like when I'm not feeling well.
He's getting riled up already.
I am.
Jim,
I'm gonna burn this in a minute.
That's not an American flag.
Yeah. But that's a really good record. Don't do it.
Yes, it's not a prog album. It's an absolutely brilliant album.
It's a great album nonetheless.
And that's where you get us guys.
Yeah,
it's all the other bloody music, but we'll forget that for now.
We are going to forget that for now because that would be unfair. But I contend that one of the advantages the United States has is in the origin story of prog. Yeah, once we get to the King Crimsons and the Yes and the Genesis and all of that, we're not going to be able to touch 1969 to 1974. But I contend that pre-1969 American music was instrumental in the development of prog with, people like Frank Zappa and Miles Davis and Dave Brubeck and the whole thing going on with the Doors and Grateful Dead and the Jefferson Airplane and the whole psychedelic thing leading up into prog. I think the American influence on early prog has been underrepresented. Do you have any opinion about that, Jim Newstead? Because I know Andy's got an opinion about it.
I'm sure he has. I think you're right. What you were saying about the 1969 to 74, 75 era, that it's untouchable as a British era. But I think you're also right that from an origins point of view, I mean, there's so much stuff that goes into prog, so many different influences and inspirations from jazz, from symphonic music, orchestral music, to blues, to psychedelia. So, of course, the Doors are very important. I'd say even Jimi Hendrix was, from a psychedelic point of view, sort of making that much more accessible and mainstream. And people suddenly switched onto it and listening to it. So,
in the comments already, Jim, they're already chiming in the comments. Prog is British. I think he meant period. I think he meant full stop. Notice the subconscious is working and he put a comma there because he knows it's not the full story, but that's a whole other issue.
I've written down. I should have prepared much better than I have for today. I've kind of just on the train coming back from London.
These are just thoughts.
I just noted down a few things that I thought were probably quite important from an American point of view, just trying to sort of balance it a bit. So I had Kansas. There was a couple of 3 albums. I think I don't know all their music, so I can't comment on that fairly. But some stuff that I have heard from them, I'd say is very proggy. Styx, I know nothing about, but I know you talk about them quite a lot, Scott. And I'd also say Todd Rundgren's Utopia, which is sort of fairly early as well. But as you say, Zappa, the Mahavishnu Orchestra, Weather Report, this sort of like fusion stuff, that all feeds into it as well. And
we can't really claim Mahavishnu all by ourselves, can we, Andy?
No, I've got John McLaughlin.
I want to so bad, man. I want Mahavishnu to
you ain't having it. But also, if we sort of talk about the modern prog as well, sort of the great sort of transatlantic, again, has America in it, but it's only half of it. There's you've got Sweden and the UK in there as well. So it's, I guess, apart from Dream Theater, and if you talk about Neil Morse, sort of as the sort of the big modern American acts, or Tool, of course. But it's I'd say the UK is still at the forefront, and I think it's telling that the country is so small but has produced such a huge amount of influential music.
It's insane.
So if you wanted to do this fairly, you need to pick a state in America and compare that to the UK, rather than saying the UK against the whole of the US.
That's not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
No. Because I contend that America's sheer size, the vastness, the scope, the geography of America made it well nigh impossible to break a ban before deregulation happened and every radio station in America started playing the same exact songs in 1980. Before that, man, it was really hard to break a band in America. You had to go from coast to coast and kiss a lot of rings and pay off a lot of, people at a lot of radio stations. It was hard work, man. It really was.
I tell you what, though, the Beatles did it okay. The Rolling Stones did it. Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd. Yes, I mean, these bands broke America, didn't they?
They did, but, I'm telling you, they were UK bands. But notice we're talking about all these bands and they cared about one market and one market only, right? They didn't care if they broke in Belgium. They cared if they broke in the United States of America, man. You look at all the energy that the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, prog bands like Jethro Tull and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, they spent a whole lot of time and energy trying to break the U.S. market. So I think, that indirectly has prog scene.
They had to, didn't they? I mean, we had to really, because you hadn't got any decent bands yourself. I mean, that's the main problem. I mean, it's us British. I mean, we don't like traveling, especially to the New World. So it was a lot of hassle. Getting on the plane, taking all your gear, mellotrons, capes, all the way over to America to try, and make up for the lack of prog or decent bands in general. Yeah, well, I mean, before we start the prog, let's just take bands.
Yeah,
I would say the greatest band were the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Rolling Stones. How far do we need to go before we start to scrape up Lynyrd Skynyrd and ZZ Top as being in the same league even? Yeah. So the question is,
Scott's getting hot over here, Andy. Scott's getting hot.
I'm deliberately doing it. I am riling him up a little bit. The question is,
you've never seen me riled up.
I haven't.
Nope.
That's my.
But the question is, why? I think it's because there is a magical combination between American rhythm and blues, rock and roll, jazz, all that American stuff, which is absolutely fantastic, and we all love it. When you mix that with the eccentric British sort of almost like music hall
quirkiness,
that sort of Monty Python, I'm being serious now. On my channel, I call this the English aesthetic, and I think there's a magical mix of those two things together. And of course, it's the Beatles we have to thank for this.
Yeah.
But there's a big history of this that runs through, and it's like a magical mix. And you Americans, you love it. You love that English thing. Now, the thing that's interesting, I'm going to throw some serious things in before I go back to just being, my usual sort of prejudiced Englishman role that I do. But before we get there, why is it that Canada has produced some better prog bands compared to the United States of America?
Yeah, we were just saying, man, if we had Rush on our side, I'd feel a whole lot better about this argument.
yeah. I mean, it's but there's other ones as well, isn't it? I mean, Starcastle, they're Canadian?
They're from Missouri.
US, are they?
They're from St.
We
Louis.
also get Happy the Man.
Happy the Man.
Yeah. So there, I will give the classic era to the UK for sure.
Well, of course.
So and you got to look at all eras though, right? You can't just look at the precursors to prog, which I'll say the Americans maybe have the edge there. The actual prog era itself, the golden era, 69 to 74. Obviously, the UK is untouchable there. What happened there, I can't explain, man. Like I said, 8 of my 10 favorite bands are from Britain from 69 to 74. Something was going on that's unparalleled in the history of mankind. I say the greatest music ever occurred during that era. But we got to look at all eras, man. And after the golden era, things started falling apart for a lot of those UK bands. And if you look in the 80s, we had some really good bands like Marillion, right, Andy?
Look, I don't know if you know, I used to drum for IQ, and so that you would imagine that there's this rivalry amongst the neo prog bands.
I adore IQ. I absolutely positively.
And how much better are IQ than Marillion? Come on, be on. Don't worry about them. I know they're watching.
I think it's kind of like comparing pizza and hamburgers. I like consuming both.
I've always preferred IQ. I'm right there with you, Andy.
If I had to pick, I would pick. If I had to pick, I would pick IQ between those two. But I like.
You got to say, my tongue is in my cheek. The Marillion thing is really just because I was in IQ, and so in the early days of my channel, people kept saying, "You only like IQ. You're only saying this because you're in IQ and you don't like Marillion." So I just started to go with it. But of course, again, those neo-prog bands, Marillion really pulled something off in the 1980s. It's quite incredible what they did.
They really did. They had a whole thing going on. They not just sold a few records, they created like this whole scene where young kids were like getting all excited to go see this cat with makeup on his face and stuff like that, competing with the punks and stuff like that. It is very, very impressive. But again, things kind of fizzled out a little bit. And I think there's a whole American prog metal starts coming up at the end of the 80s. And I argue that the Americans have a lot to be proud of with from the late 80s throughout the 90s. I think we trumped the UK, with bands like, it starts with like Fate's Warning and
I wouldn't bring Trump into it at this stage. He's bound to come in at some point when I really need to, kick below the belt. He will be brought in. But if you take progressive metal, right? I think we had a thing called the new wave of British heavy metal, Iron Maiden, all those Diamond Head. Yeah. And just up the road from where I live, up in Stourbridge, was where Diamond Head came from. And Lars Ulrich used to come over and keep on Brian Tatler's floor to study from the source how to make that sort of heavy metal. And I believe that progressive metal has its roots in Iron Maiden, Diamond Head, and then Metallica and all those sorts of bands. And you could plot it through that the progressive metal still is coming out of the UK. It's coming out from the new wave of British heavy metal. And I've met Brian Tatler a few times, and he was an out and out prog fan. That's what the new wave of British heavy metal was. It was like a cross between almost like punk and prog.
Definitely. Yeah,
it's been well documented, isn't it, about Steve Harris's love of Jethro Tull and Genesis, and and how much of that feeds into his writing. So it's absolutely. We've had this conversation many times, Scott, about how prog is Iron Maiden, and they are certainly, if not a prog band, they are
Iron Maiden's
very
prog.
prog influenced.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah. Iron Maiden are prog, and it's like there's an interesting thing I spotted is that if you take Van der Graaf Generator, take Peter Hamill, his vocal influence is huge on two singers. One's John Lydon, and the other one's Bruce Dickinson, and they are both directly modelled consciously, and they've admitted it, on Peter Hamill.
Yeah,
and then when you listen. You know, if you listen to Van der Graaf Generator, the heaviness of that and the heaviness of King Crimson, and so progressive metal has its roots in Rush, I would say, in King Crimson, in Rainbow, and in Van der Graaf Generator. That's where the roots are.
Yeah.
Now, you know, you can look at it a lot of different ways, from eras, like I was attempting to do, to try to level the playing field a little bit, but you know, you could take another look at it from different subgenres too. It doesn't have to just be certain eras or whatever, but you know, we mentioned prog metal just a second ago. What about fusion? How do we account for fusion in this debate?
That's kind of a not uniquely, but it's dominated more, I think, in the U.S. than it is in Britain, but not exclusively, obviously.
Because I can only comment about when I was growing up. This whole fusion thing like happened overnight. It seemed all of a sudden, you know, all my friends were listening to like Stanley Clarke and Chick Corea records, and I'm like, what in the world is going on around here, man? It was really weird. But it did seem like it was kind of, you know, organically American. Andy, Jim, what's your take on that?
Well, my take has been I'm more of a fusion fan than a prog fan.
Yeah,
I would say, of course, it's an American form, but without John McLaughlin, you've got no fusion.
Exactly.
And also the thing with fusion is that the best fusion, which was a sort of 1970 to 75 before it got funkified, which was the American influence coming back in, was where the fusion bands wasn't just a fusion with prog, so a fusion with rock. It was a fusion with prog rock.
Yeah.
And the shadow of King Crimson and Yes and Death that hangs over those bands. But when you get to the Mahavishnu, of course, John McLaughlin was right there in the middle of it in London, pre-69, working with the likes of Brian Auger and all the whole. Have you ever heard the first Oblivion Express album from 1971?
No.
It came out just before the Inner Mat in Flame by the Mahavishnu. No. You hear it sounds like the Mahavishnu because Brian Auger's in there already.
Right.
Now, the British fusion scene, which I've just done a video on, is very, very interesting, but just never got a grip. And with British fusion, it's either what I call hidden in plain sight, which would be like the Jeff Beck albums that have sold literally millions, you know, like Wired and Blow by Blow.
Right.
Or you're talking about bands like Isotope or Tempest or Backdoor, which no one's heard of. So it seems to always sit there, you know, with the fusion thing. But the biggest fusion we had over here was the fusion that is between prog and jazz rock fusion, which would be your Soft Machines, your Brand X's, you know, some of the Canterbury bands. You know, there's a certain sound there, and you get Bruford's band. So I think it's very hard to take the UK out of this scene. Yeah. And I did stay quiet, but I will chip it in now. When you're saying about all these American bands that were sort of precursors to prog, were you talking like about Procol Harum and the Nice and Pink Floyd?
No, I didn't mention them.
Was it those bands? Did you mention those at all?
No, I didn't mention them.
Or King Crimson, or maybe.
I didn't talk about them for a reason. You know what that reason was, but you actually bring up a really good point that I hadn't really thought about, and that is because, you know, being a big prog rock fan, I'm very aware of the influence that John McLaughlin and Mahavishnu in particular had on a lot of my favorite bands, right? It was pretty obvious what records they were listening to, what band they were going on tour with, right?
Relayer, we're looking at you.
Hello, Relayer.
But
I never really thought about how some of that prog rock was being reflected back on some of those fusion bands, and why you targeted 1970 to 1975 as being that year, that magic period where those fusion albums are just so good, man. It's like you just pick one at random, it's probably going to be awesome. Yeah, that's kind of the way I thought about it too, but I never really was able to codify it like that. So that's an interesting point.
If you were to push me to say what is the best 70s American prog album, I could probably go through the first Utopia album. I think that is because Kansas and Styx, it's still a little bit lightweight compared to what we have. But I would go for Romantic Warrior by Return to Forever, which is one of the most prog albums ever made. Yeah. It's just the amount of prog fans I've said, you should listen to this. And they go, it's a jazz fusion album. I said, no, it's a prog album. Look at the cover. It's, the Romantic Warrior with a knight on a horse, and it opens up with Medieval Overture. I would say you are right that the best American prog is the fusion when it goes up that end.
I've said almost the same thing for years, Andy. You are absolutely positively right. Absolutely. No question. Return to Forever.
And the whole Styx thing, Kansas and whatnot, Kansas actually, you dig deeper into their catalog, they're pretty progressive to me, but I'll give you Styx. Even Dennis DeYoung recently, when pressed, said that Styx was prog light. And I think that's pretty accurate. And I don't think they ever really pretended they were anything but, or they were happy filling stadiums and making all that money, man. But I'm a big fan. Everybody knows it. But I'm also a huge fan of what's going on in the modern prog scene. And that's why I'm so happy to have
I don't like that.
Andy and Scott both, putting records out in this modern prog sphere, in this current environment, which, if truth be told, Norway's probably got both our countries beat over the last 5 or 6 years. But, I just want to give a big shout out to Robin Peachy. And I know I'm supposed to be on Team America, but man, this new Return to the Earth album, man. Oh, so good. I just love it. Just fantastic. So 1 point to the UK right there. But the modern scene, it does seem to me that it's been more globalized, and it's hard for me to really give the UK a whole lot of points. Past UK, Frost, perhaps. I don't know, some other new band called Rain put a couple records out that I've liked a lot.
Gosh, they're crap. They were some bloody Frost.
Yeah,
I like Frost a lot. It's one of my favorite bands.
No, I don't. Too overproduced.
Yeah.
Don't you think just too overproduced?
No.
Especially the first two.
It's like the production suits the material. The production suits the material. It does. It does.
That's why I haven't even opened that, man. That's why it's still shrink wrapped.
Don't.
No,
am I on that one?
Yeah, I don't know. That's just a little, little debut album from a little band called Frost that Andy was on. But, it's actually interesting because someone is just reading my mind in the comments. And that is Black Midi. Anybody have any thoughts about this band, Black Midi?
None.
I think they're wonderful. And this is the trouble with prog. Is that you've got prog the genre, which is mellotrons and playing in 7/8 and singing about wizards or dystopian futures. It's all that, as I always say, what would it be? It's a jackdaw on the shoulder of a jester who is dancing on a chessboard. When I was in IQ, we came up with the most prog thing we could, and that was what it was.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So we all love that, and then there's the spirit of progressive music, which is what Black Midi is, isn't it? It's taking rock music and then pushing at the extremes in it and seeing where the limits, which is what Yes and Genesis were doing in the 70s.
Yeah.
But do you want your prog bands to do that now? That's the question. How much do you want them to push it at the limits of contemporary music?
Do you want progressive music to be genuinely progressive, or do you want it just to be a reflective of what we think the genre sounds like? So I think you've said before, Andy, about a lot of bands. Yeah, a lot of bands now seem like they're sort of tribute bands to a previous era, rather than sort of doing genuinely new stuff.
Yeah, so we should probably
And the shame with it is because prog has got the name prog.
Yeah.
Right. Is that we expect those bands to do that, to be progressive, and so we can point the finger. If you're playing in a funk band and you want to sound like Earth, Wind and Fire, no one's going to have a go at you for sounding like Earth, Wind and Fire. They're going to pat you on the back. You know, that around here, there's loads of ska bands that want to sound like, you know, those two-tone bands from the early 80s.
The Specials, Madness.
And the whole point is you sound like that, but with a prog band, if they want to sound like Pink Floyd or Genesis, then they get knocked. And I've been one of those people who has knocked those type of bands because I always liked to be able to push the envelope. But there again, I want to, you know, with the music I make, I want to be able to push the envelope in certain ways that are very proggy, like long songs on time signatures and all that type of thing. Yeah. So I think there's two separate things going on here. I've said that the To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar is a full-on progressive rock album. It does everything a progressive rock album. It's conceptual, it's long form, it's got virtuoso musicians on, it goes into jazz improvisation, everything that you would expect an album to do. But no prog fan's going to listen to it because there's no mellotrons. You're going to have the mellotrons.
Yeah, I don't think it's a Manchester scene here, Kyle. I think Black Midi, Black Country New Roads, Quiz, I think that's more like a South London thing, right? And I'm really into it because I really feel like, you know, we've been kind of stuck on this third wave of prog. Where's the fourth wave, man? I think maybe we're seeing it and we're not really recognizing it because, you know, the gatekeepers don't want to allow for, you know, somebody that doesn't sound like Yes or Genesis into the club. Well, that's what we're doing here. We're breaking down barriers because I, for one, believe in the big tent. But we're going on a whole different tangent here. We're actually supposed to be talking about, you know, the UK versus you know, the US. But let's be honest, you know.
But we beat you almost straight off, didn't we? You've got to be honest. Straight out the gate, it was like a few knocks and you were down on the floor. We stood up a little bit, stumbled around, and then bang.
My favorite band is Yes. I mean, what am I supposed to do? It's a wrap. But you know, I love Iron Maiden too. So again, every counter punch, I'm like, yeah, I'm just taking it. They're right.
I mean, even cruddy third-rate prog bands we've got from the 70s, like Camel. Camel's better than anything you've got.
Well, we are going to go.
Now wait a minute. Okay,
yeah, come on, Scott.
I've sat here quietly and listened to this crap for the last half hour. It's on.
Okay,
I have a list just from my own record collection of classic American prog rock acts that should be taken into consideration, whether you like them or not. It's all a personal choice. The thing that has to be said about the UK versus the US, I like to think of it as this huge transatlantic ping pong table. And things go back and forth and back and forth, and not just in prog. Obviously, in so many other blues has come back and forth across the Atlantic so many times. It's a symbiotic relationship. And if you're like me and you love prog, you naturally love all things England and all things UK because it's a uniquely English thing.
And we thank you. By the way, hey, Scott, thank you. Thank you to the UK.
Absolutely
we
right.
We love the UK. Thank you for the English language. By the way, that's awesome. It's the lingua franca. The whole world speaks English.
Jim, they're trying to get us with compliments now because they know we're English and they know we don't like this sort of thing. Do we? We don't like this. Yes, that's very kind of you. Thank you very much.
We know. We got the idea.
Thank you.
They've got our Achilles heel. They've got our Achilles heel.
Ambrosia, The Aristocrats, Adrian Belew, Robert Barry, Blotted Science, Bosio Levin Stevens, Cairo, Chicago. Les Claypool's Frog Brigade, Coheed and Cambria, Crack the Sky, Crimson Glory, Cryptic Vision, who are local to my area in Florida, the Dixie Dregs. The Dixie Dregs. Dream Theater, Ekelin, Enchant, Fate's Warning, Flying Colors, Glass Hammer, Gordian Knot, Happy the Man Is, who have a wonderful new album, just came out last week, Kansas, King's X, Magellan, Queensryche, Salem Hill, David Sanchez, Sabotage, Shadow Gallery, Spiraling, which is Tom Brislin's band, Spock's Beard with and without Neil Morse, Star Castle, Toy Matinee, and Kevin Gilbert. Frank Zappa, that's a whole big chunk of it right there, and Zebra. And that's just from my own record collection. Now, when the assignment was given down, the show was announced, let's face it, friends, this is a fool's errand. We all love this music, and it's uniquely filtered through the British thing. But what we have to recognize about that ping pong table that I mentioned, there's so much of it that depends on one another. Without Pet Sounds, there is no Sergeant Pepper's. That can be argued successfully, I think. All of these American and British groups of all these different generations, Mirthrander, they all fed off one another. And that's a good thing. That's a wonderful thing, because I don't know anything about being British or English. I don't know anything about it, but I do know that I admire the country and the scenery and the people and the culture and the music. Emerson, Lake and Palmer is my very, very favorite band ever. And that's about as British as it gets. So it's kind of a fool's errand, but there are things that, there were a lot of American influences on some of these, the big prog bands. The Moody Blues, for instance, were influenced by Beach Boys and Jefferson Airplane. King Crimson's influences in America are many: Hendrix, Miles Davis, Frank Zappa, John Coltrane, Joni Mitchell. In my research of the influences, the American influences on some British bands, a name that kept coming up is Vanilla Fudge. A lot of these musicians claimed Vanilla Fudge as an influence, which I found fascinating. Yes, I mean, the individual influences in that band: Wes Montgomery, Chet Atkins, The Fifth Dimension, Simon and Garfunkel, Max Roach, Joe Morello, Art Blakey.
Well, yeah, you just mentioned people right there. That Steve Howe, he mentions Wes Montgomery and Chet Atkins as his number one and his number two influences. Chris Squire and John Anderson cite Simon and Garfunkel as the reason Yes ever formed in the first place. So yeah, those are some good points. And as you were rattling some of those names off, Scott, it got me thinking a lot of the modern prog bands that people like are real jazzed about, like, the Coheed and Cambrias and the Mars Volta and the Deer Hunter.
There's no Mellotrons in any of that music.
No, but it's prog to me, man.
It is. Anyway, moving on here, Greg Lake always professed that his main musical influence throughout his life was Elvis Presley.
Yeah.
And so there's that. Genesis have gone on record as being influenced by Spirit and the Byrds and a number of other things. The thing is, when you talk about the generational aspect, Scott, of progressive music in general, it goes through stages, and I'm happy that it goes through stages, because it's okay that prog is a style. And
happy Father's Day, by the way.
Yes, absolutely.
Is that a thing in the UK?
Yes, it is.
To all the fathers out there, happy Father's Day. Thanks for spending Father's Day with us. That's awesome.
I owe my dad my love of prog. He's the records that he listened to, particularly things like Dark Side of the Moon and Trilogy and Fragile, and those records were the ones that really planted the seeds for me. He took me to see Pink Floyd in '77 in Kansas City, and I owe my dad a lot of what my musical education was in the beginning and continues to be.
All right. Hartler.
Anyway, you talk the generational thing. The big six, the main prog bands have they've tapered off, and they should. They absolutely should. They established a style that many people enjoy, and artists like myself continue to integrate into their music, and that's a good thing. But other bands like Coheed and Cambria, like other Opeth, other bands like that, they have progressed while not necessarily being prog with a capital P. So I think that's an important distinction there. The last really good Yes record for me was The Ladder, and that was 25 years ago. Mirror to the Sky is okay. It's a step in the right direction, but and I think that's as it should be. I think everything in life naturally has a span. It's born, it thrives, and it sort of passes away. And I think that's important.
Yeah, but that said, the last 2 Styx albums and the last
really
2 Kansas albums have been amazing, brother.
They are really good. Yes,
Go
they are.
America.
Yeah, they are. They're excellent. They really are. It's only natural for all that sort of stuff to continue and develop, and for, you know, all that is old to be new again in different ways. Is that progressive? Probably not, but we as listeners must gravitate, I think, to what we enjoy. You know, obviously the winners in all of this are all 4 of us and everyone watching this program. We, the listeners, we get the music.
Yeah.
Whether it's American, whether it's English, whether it's Scandinavian, doesn't matter. I think we're all winners in this game because we get all of the music and we get to choose for ourselves.
Yeah, but I think,
but also you have to remember that in this competition, England is the winner when it comes to progressive rock, as we've established earlier on. So that obviously we don't win much, you see. We you know, considering we invented everything, you know, and most games, you know, most sports we invented as well, but we don't win much. But I think, you know, we should at least get the you know, win the prog rock ownership award.
Point conceded. Point conceded to the gentleman from England.
What I wanted it to be serious.
I want to be serious too. Frank Zappa.
Yeah, I'm gonna get onto Frank Zappa. Yeah, he's knowing like Robert Plant from Zeppelin, knowing the ELO guys, knowing some of the Moody Blues guys, meeting the Black Sabbath guys. Those bands in the UK, especially around it happened, and actually the clubs where this happened, there was a huge interest in the San Francisco bands here in the UK, of those bands that were formative around about 68. And one of the tracks, there's a number of tracks I know that were directly influenced. One of them would have been the Da Capo album by Love and 7 and 7 Is. And when you listen to 7 and 7 Is, it seems a blueprint for so many bands. Russia as well. They were another band that took sort of 7 and 7 Is and took that wholesale. So I agree. But what it is that those sort of psychedelic San Francisco bands aren't prog, because the prog has, I think, it's the same with krautrock. I don't class krautrock as prog.
Yeah,
it's brilliant.
That's a tough one,
that is a tough one.
It's just totally different genre. It's not prog. Prog is Englishness mixed with American rhythm and blues, rock and roll. That's what it is. So, of course, that's why the English bands are so great. Except when you guys, now I'm going to argue your case for you, except when you guys have a true genius that is not following what we would class as the British progressive model. And there's 2 guys there, Todd Rundgren and Frank Zappa. They're both full on prog, but they're nothing like British prog.
Yep. I would agree with that. Yep, absolutely.
And that Wizard of the True Star, is that the album?
Yeah.
More Than Utopia. That album is like properly the most prog album you're ever gonna hear in your life. And then you got things like Captain Beefheart. There's a whole, I think you should be championing your prog, which is different to our prog. I think there's a far more lunatic fringe in American prog, but it doesn't get labeled like that. But I think Captain Beefheart would be one, Zappa's one, Todd Rundgren, the Tubes, I think to a certain extent, you know, there's a chaotic insanity there.
There's a lot of the modern, like, rock and opposition bands, the Thinking Plagues and bands like that.
Go listen to Blotted Science. That stuff is way out there.
There's some crazy stuff out there for sure. But I think early on, again, I point to the size of the North American continent being a hindrance for a lot of these bands that might have put out one self-produced album that nobody ever heard and then disappeared. And so I think there was a lot of potential wasted back in those days that now, let's face it, dude from Spotify says you know there are 0 costs to record an album now. Anybody?
I know.
Get a rope.
What was that guy even thinking?
My God, is there a brain in that big skull? I'd like to know.
But it's so easy now, right? Anybody can do it.
The trouble is he's right, because
he is right.
This morning I sat on what's it called, the site? I can't remember that AI site that Rick Beato was. Have you been there?
Yeah.
And you type in, I was going, do a progressive rock about, and then just come with like baked beans. And then within about 40 seconds, it gives you 2 full-on progressive rock tracks about baked beans. 2! Bang! And it sounds like real progressive rock with vocals and mellotrons and capes. It's all on there. And I've sat there, I did 8 tracks just by putting in, do a jazz rock album about, biscuits and I just kept writing these in and all these tracks are coming out. It's incredible stuff.
It's wild.
And the AI stuff sounds better than the stuff that's being made by actual human beings.
It's so sad. Yeah, I seen what you posted the other day, that really creepy song that sounded like some weird Zappa track that lost from 1974 or something. Just awesome. And that's all AI, right?
So that was like flying in and out from the screen.
Yeah, but I did that bit just to put my stamp on it. But I just basically said, "Can you do Miles Davis and Frank Zappa?"
Okay,
that's what that was. That's what that was, and literally, 30 seconds later, bang, that all came out. So, but the AI video I've got dropping tomorrow, I basically have created a ranking video completely out of AI that I've had no involvement with. So there's another Andy Edwards that he cut, and the whole choice. And when it came through, and it was all ranked, and it had got all the comments in, I looked at this list. I said, I asked AI, come up with the 10 greatest, rank the 10 greatest progressive rock albums. It came up with this list, and then I gave it to the AI avatar, and she said it, and I put it, I've done all that. But the list is more objective than any prog list I've ever done. Dark Side of the Moon at number 1, Close to the Edge at number 2, Selling England by the Pound at number 3. And I went away, I thought I wouldn't have chosen that, but Dark Side should be above Close to the Edge.
Probably.
It should. Yeah. And I thought it's got it. So this AI thing is
I would much
terrifying.
rather see your list, Andy.
Yeah,
it's more interesting to me.
So what is it about us humans that we actually really like? Because I think that's, we're having this argument. We know it's a stupid argument, isn't it? But it's really because we want to get into these musicians. And like, if I now champion Frank Zappa's unlike anything else, and he can't be. Frank Zappa be argued with.
Frank Zappa is an industry all unto himself. Obviously, there's never will be another human being like Frank, let alone an artist and musician. He approached absolutely everything he did in his life, in his career, with his own single-minded determination. And the music, for once in this lifetime, plenty of musicians approach their careers in the same way. None of them make music like Frank Zappa did.
Here we've got two guys, Scott and Andy, both making music these days. Doesn't AI kind of terrify you? Like,
it pisses me off.
What am I here for?
It pisses me off. Let's just go ahead and drop a bomb here. As someone who is working very hard to craft music, and admittedly, I'm doing what I do with Myth of Logic for me. If other people enjoy it, I'm real happy about that. But I make these records because I'm compelled to do it. And for no other reason, really for no other reason. But AI is, I don't know, it's disingenuous. It's a sham, I think. I think it will put people out of work, real artists. We're already seeing the punishment meted out in such a way that artists just stop making records, stop writing new music. What unknown artists have we been cheated out of? Say it's a guy who plays in a garage band on the weekends, but he just writes the most incredible songs and sings his heart out. But the current state of things in the world, such as they are, just beat him down so hard that we, the public, the listeners of the world, we never get to hear that music. He, she, whoever, it could be anybody who toils in obscurity. And then something like AI comes along, and anyone with an app on their phone can create their own music in 30 seconds. I spent years mastering instruments and recording and mixing.
But nobody cares.
And I still haven't gotten it right. That's the fun of it.
Jim, nobody cares about, some old song that you're reacting to. What they care about is Jim Newstead, right? It's that human touch that actually elevates stuff, that actually in the end gets people interested, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think you're absolutely right about this, and that is the magic, if you will. It's a slightly sort of grand thing to talk about, but people want to connect with people, not with machines, not with algorithms, not with playlists. Playlists are useful for yourself if you're making music to listen to in the car or to go to the gym or something like that. But when you want to share an experience, you want to know that you're listening to or talking about or experiencing music that is conveying the human condition. That is a piece of art. It's there for a reason. It's been made as a tool for you as the listener to use to try and make sense of the world that you're in. And AI will never do that. AI will make noise as entertainment, and it'll be fun and you can dance to it and all that sort of stuff. But actually, if you want something which is genuine and real and you want people to understand you, or people want to understand the human condition, AI is never going to do that.
That's exactly
and I think that's why
I watch all of your channels, all three of you guys. I watch all of your stuff on a regular basis for that reason. I want to know what you think and what you have to say as people speaking to me and helping me to decide what I like or don't like. One of my favorite aspects of.
But this video I've got coming out tomorrow on AI, when I started work on it, I was going to say all this. But I think I've found another even greater fault with AI, was that I'd had this idea originally that that you can get avatars to speak, and I thought, wouldn't it be great to have an avatar that is in my sort of garage in front of my records, but it's an avatar, and he starts talking, but he just starts to insult me. So I wrote I wrote a monologue where he just starts to insult me. He comes on, he says, Andy's not here, I'm the AI avatar. And so I wrote this. It took me ages to write. It had a load of jokes in it. I put it into the AI, and the AI said, "Can't do that. It's bullying." And I went, "Okay." So I changed it, and basically, I could not get it. I could not get it to say what I wanted to say. Nice. And the thing is doing the music this morning, you have to feed it in a certain way. If you go, I've had a brilliant idea. Let's do this, this, and this, and this, and it's an actual idea. The AI sort of goes, I don't get what you're on about, can't do it. And there was one I put in, I thought, I had a brilliant idea, put it in, and it went, we can't export this. It's not worked. They're putting morality into it. They're programming in the morality of saying you could say that. And I thought, I'm not saying anything offensive. I'm insulting myself, and it wasn't terrible stuff that I was saying about me.
Right.
So then I rewrote it where it just said that I was amazing. And that was the best YouTuber in the world. And he said, and that went through. And I thought, oh God, I'm allowed to be like a narcissistic egomaniac, but I can't be self-deprecating.
Welcome to 2024.
I know, and I thought isn't that it? So when they come to try and use it to create anything that anyone wants to actually of any use, the morality will come in and say, as it would have said in 1969. No, you're not making in the court of the Crimson King. No, it's too weird. People won't like it. You can't put it out. And I think that'll be the fault. And I think people will be able to spot not the fact that it sounds unreal, because it will sound completely real. It pretty much does now. But what the problem will be is they'll go, oh my God, it's the same old thing. It's the same old thing. And
we're already dealing with that, Andy, with the algorithms on Spotify and stuff like that, where, if the words don't hit, within 10 seconds and the chorus doesn't hit within 20, it's not going to tickle the algorithm's fancy. And, there's big, believe it or not, artists, such as prog artists don't see any kind of return on streaming revenue whatsoever. But apparently the big names do. So I guess there's a science to it, tricking the algorithm and making some song make money for you on streaming. I don't understand.
I suppose I suppose also the big artists have already got following, so people will be listening to it, want to listen to that music. They're not discovering it for the first time.
Yeah.
So what you're talking about, the algorithm, is introducing people to new songs. That's where people are going to miss out. So they're not going. People who haven't heard Genesis and Yes, or even sort of probably some Radiohead, for example, or Muse, are not going to, because the music's not deemed presentable to this audience. So that's the problem with the algorithm. It's not the big bands.
But the other thing here is that I think that the progressive rock bands and the jazz fusion bands and all the bands that I'm interested in, I try and push on my channel, don't understand now commercially how it works.
Yeah.
So they don't understand that. So you get this thing, Spotify is almost like evil. It's not evil. If it pays 60% of the ad revenue, YouTube pays 44%. I'm making money out of YouTube, and it's a less of a payout than Spotify. But the reason is my videos are an hour long. And if you put a record up that's like 3 minutes long, you get one ad and it's nothing. So the podcasters are making a ton of money on Spotify. Yeah. That's why they'd rather be there than on YouTube, right? And people who are getting like 30 million, listens a month, that adds up to something. And I know those artists that are living off that, but that's commercial music. If you're making music that we're interested in, we need to go somewhere else, and nobody is. And I think the future for all of us is Patreon. And people haven't explored Patreon deep enough. I've got a huge community on Patreon, and now I've got my own WhatsApp group. I've got my own, my community is there, and I can go to them and go, "Have you heard this record?" They all do it themselves now. They're just eating this stuff up.
Yeah,
you see. So I think the progressive rock business needs to change the model, and what it needs to do is it needs to see itself as part of the community, and part of the community is what we're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. It's about finding different revenue streams, creating, your own like little ecosystem. And you talked about Patreon. You didn't talk about your Discord server, which I'm pretty sure you have one of those too. I mean, there's all these different ways to connect and create this environment. And I think you're right. A lot of these bands, let's face it, a lot of the bands I like, some of the cats in those bands aren't a whole lot younger than me, man. They're old dudes, so maybe they're a little bit technologically challenged. They're thinking about stuff all wrong. It's 2024. They need to get into the modern world and start thinking about stuff a little bit differently, because there are opportunities. You talked about, the money that you're making on your YouTube channel. Dude, I'm monetized. I'm making decent money on this channel, and it's just wrong that a lot of bands don't kind of capitalize on, some of the things, some of the opportunities that are out there. They're missing out. It drives me crazy when there's like, well, there's no Spotify. Well, why not? Why, I don't understand that thinking at all.
I kind of
Scott. Sorry to blow some sunshine your way, but when I saw your channel come out, because I was looking at channels that I was behind. You look at channels like Classic Album Review, and you go, "Oh my God, he's got 60,000 scores. I've only got like 5." And then you get to so I'm on 30,000. I think you're on about 10 now, aren't you?
Yeah.
Is that right? So I've watched you come up, and I know that when you got to 10, I thought, I know how much money he's making now. And then I see you. And the thing is, I mean, we're relatively old, but we've been able to get our heads around it. This is the future, and I think it's really exciting.
Yeah.
It's really exciting, but the trouble is the networks haven't quite got in there yet, because I'll contact certain musicians, say, to do interviews, and they like, I'll name a name, Rick Wakeman.
Yeah.
I have a friend who is Rick Wakeman's tour manager. So I've got a direct to Rick Wakeman. So I said, well, Rick, come on my channel. And he went and asked Rick, and he came back. So just asked Rick, and he said no, because it's on the internet. And it's just a YouTube, blah, blah, blah. And I felt like going, he doesn't understand.
They don't get it.
Yeah.
He doesn't understand that. Yeah, it's like, I might not be the biggest, but my 30,000 subscribers know exactly who Rick Wakeman is. Like, it's like, that's direct. Whereas he can go to a much bigger YouTube, it's got 1 million, but most of those people are going, who the hell is this Rick Wakeman?
Yeah. And the reality is that we are niched down to the point where, we actually can move the needle on stuff. You know, even when I was, only at 1,000, 2,000 subscribers, if I was pushing a new album, I would hear back from the artist like, thanks for the bump, man. You know, it's like, we felt that and I appreciate that. And we actually
I've had that multiple times.
Stuff.
Yeah. I've had that multiple times when I've been doing different records and albums. It's so good. It's lovely to hear.
Pete Pardo did a review of Pictures from a Previous Dream about a month ago, and I just saw a huge spike over in Bandcamp and on YouTube and such, and I really appreciated that because, you know, he's a busy guy. He doesn't have to do that sort of thing. And it was very nice. And, you know, I don't do this right now. It's not an income stream for me, but it's nice for people to at least hear the stuff. Possibly I would like it to be a legitimate, you know, income stream on that level at some point.
Scott, are you on Patreon?
I'm not, but I'm sorry.
Just go on Patreon, right? When you come off this, go and set yourself up a Patreon, right? So I'll tell you a story because I've got a Patreon and a lot of my income now is coming from Patreon. But when we formed Rain, I said we need a Patreon. So we went online and said, we've got a Patreon, and some people joined it. Okay. But the band were complacent and we never put any stuff in.
Right.
So a few months ago, I opened it up to go and shut it down. Those guys that joined up a couple of years ago are still in that Patreon, and they're still paying in.
Sweet.
And there was hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of money in there, which we've now used to doing on the next project. So Scott, if you go and set a Patreon up, even if you only get like say 3 people in doing $7 a month, you'll forget about it as long as you make sure you get some content.
Yeah.
And I mean, all my Patreon content is done in the car. I have my phone on a stand, so I got to drive somewhere. I'll switch the music on. You know, I'll put on some music in the CD, and then I'll just talk over it while I'm driving somewhere. So I use my drives to create content for Patreon.
Isn't that amazing? People actually prefer a lot of times that content that we don't even really pre-plan at all. Is just you hit record, you start talking to the people, and this is what we were talking about. Why we don't need to fear AI at all, man. It's all
it's the and Scott on it. And if you want to get in touch, I can tell you how to get Patreon so you've got some content going up. But even if you don't, as long as the Patreon explains that what this is there is for the fans who really love your music to support you in what you're doing.
Damn.
Because you'll find in 6 months' time, you'll go, oh my God, that's just paid for physical sales.
Yeah.
I mean, we're totally off the subject of
this
America versus
a long time ago. We're watching the numbers like a hawk. People
we all knew who the winner was going to be.
Okay, now I'm gonna bring it back here. Does Frank Zappa trump? I've now used him. Does Frank Zappa trump all the British prog bands?
Of course not.
Because for me, he does. If I had to go and sell Yes, Genesis, ELP, I've got 80 Frank Zappa albums at the back. Zappa, to me, that's my guy.
Mm-hmm.
Way more than the Yes, Genesis. And I love them, but Zappa's a world in itself. I could just listen to Zappa for the rest of the time.
He's obviously a trump card. He's a world beater because he is a singular piece of music history all unto himself. Like I said earlier, an industry unto himself. I don't necessarily, I know we're trying to do the Duke out thing, but I like the fact that we get it all. We don't have to choose, because Zappa was an influence as much as anybody else we've talked about on this show. But yeah, I honestly, I don't think Zappa trumps that in my own personal listening habits, but in terms of just the recognition of Zappa's career and
he's our atom bomb.
He's our atom.
There you go.
He's our nuclear option. He really is.
He's the nuclear option.
He's something else, because there's 2 bands that I, talking about so much prog as I have on the channel. One band that I wasn't so appreciative was Pink Floyd, and yet Pink Floyd are there at every major turning point in the history of prog.
Yes, they are.
Every single one.
Yep.
Just as everyone else catches up, they bring out a new album which does this, and then they do that. Pink Floyd really, but Zappa we almost have to ignore him. You mentioned Pet Sounds, you know, and they influenced the Beatles, but Freak Out in '66 is just so way ahead of anything, you know. And you know the Beatles are listening to that. You know, the first sidelong tracks, the first use of an orchestra with the band, the first conceptual albums, every single thing that us British prog did that we can, you know, point to, Zappa had done before. And the worst of it is that us Brits will champion Soft Machine, but I always thought that Soft Machine were just a low rate Frank Zappa and the Mothers.
Yeah.
So there's me arguing. I'm just going to go and plug my laptop in. I've had a thing saying it's going to run out of power in a minute.
It's hard to ignore the shadow that Zappa casts over everything musical.
Oh, absolutely.
Particularly for those of us with an inclination to play an instrument. You know, you gain an understanding of it. There's hardly a prog band that's ever, you know, released a record that doesn't have a little something going on somewhere that you go, gee, you know, Frank did that first. But I would like to point out that Zappa never was prog with a capital P, but he was always progressive. He was always moving forward. He was always challenging himself and those around him. So
these are just definitions. They're just words.
Sure.
You know, I don't do labels, man. We talk about capital P prog, and we all know that means Yes and Genesis, and you know that kind of stuff, and everything else is just progressive music, whatever. You know, if it's good, I like it. And obviously, this whole thing was clickbait. We all know who's the winner between the U.S. and the UK, but it just felt like a lot of fun, and I wanted to do it. The real fight, however, and anybody that's a regular watcher of the Prog Corner knows, the real battle would be between the UK and Italy, because Italy's got an axe to grind in this fight. I absolutely believe that pound for pound, Italy's got something to say about this, man. Yeah.
I did a video on Italian prog. It was horrible. I had to listen to the bands. Really terrible. But
I don't remember that.
PFM, unbelievable. That is one band that I would say is equal to any British prog band. PFM just coming in just ridiculous.
Yeah,
and I think focus of the other one, but you know they're two bands.
I'm a huge fan of Banco del Marturo Soccorso and Le Orme and all that crazy stuff. Quella Vecchia Locanda and Musea Rosenbach. Yeah, that music speaks to me. But that's a whole other episode. Yeah, we've got.
Don't get me on that one. Don't get me on that one. Don't make me listen to that again.
Yeah, he won't answer
bad enough. But people singing in Italian over prog, that's even worse.
Yeah, isn't that great?
I don't know what they're on about. It's terrible stuff. Terrible stuff.
Have you
Italian prog?
Have
terrible.
You, I know you did JPL, Jim. Have you done any Italian language prog yet?
I did what was it? PMF, PLF. What we just say? Yeah. A long time ago.
PFM.
Yeah.
That's the only Italian prog that I've ever listened to. I've done some other records which are not sung in English at all, and I have no idea what they're on about. But I think one was Icelandic. I've done some various sort of Scandinavian ones.
Yeah,
some of them actually, they could be singing English. I couldn't tell at all because they're doing this, you know, the growling sound. But it might have been English. I don't know. But no, that's the PFM is the only Italian one.
Yeah, no growls.
The only decent one. Banco. Oh.
So good, man. Andy.
No, I'm joking. No, I watch my video. You can say I'd say it's all great, really.
Yeah.
It is hard work though in Italian prog.
I love it. It's my thing. Anyway, you know, this was all clickbait. The whole premise was ridiculous. It was like Scott said, it was a fool's errand. We all love prog rock, and obviously the British kind of are the number one practitioners of it, but we just wanted to defend our home country a little bit, you know. God bless America. I love the red, white, and blue, man. Hey, Jim, what do you got going on your channel this week? Any good episodes coming up?
I have no idea. I don't ever think about it until I sort of start on the day. I really don't know what I'm doing this week at all.
I like that.
There'll be some music.
That's kind of cool.
That's kind of all it is. So I sort of come in the morning. So right, how do I feel today? What have I got? Have I got time to listen to an album? Have I got time to talk about something? So, I just haven't got the. I know I'm going to talk about my records, do my A to Z of records, whatever it is. I just don't know until I come in the morning. And depending on how.
So there's one we got you beat. We say Z, so we say it right.
No.
I think you found it's called English. You're talking English. So if we say it's a certain way, that's the way it is. Just remember that.
Remember, it's aluminium, it's missile, and you spell colour with a U.
Aluminum. Yeah, it's aluminum.
Jim, when you said aluminium, the powers that be that control the world, these American evil elites, they made your voice go all strange at that point.
Oh yeah. Yes. And he'll be shadow banned. Don't worry about that. His videos will no longer get any kind of views at all. Speaking of which, what do you got planned, Andy? Any big news? You keep talking about this video. You gonna post that tomorrow?
Yeah, that's coming out tomorrow. I've been ill, so I've got the history of the Mavish Structure on Wednesday, which I did in bed, lying on my back, and that was just audio. I just put the phone next to my voice and just spoke it, and then stuck some photos over the top. My patrons have been working on their. I mean, I've got 300 patrons now, and they're working on their 30 top prog bands, right? And because they're prog rock fans and they're like got OCD and they're really anal retentive, they have produced some incredible bar charts for me, which I was very pleased with. Only a progressive rock fan comes up with bar charts.
Oh, they're going to come up on all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah, they've got it all. Yeah, pie charts, all
spreadsheets.
Statistically, they have come up with this 30 greatest prog bands, and I went, I'm doing it. This is brilliant, So I thought I'll do the AI one and I'll do my Patreon one. And then what I've been trying to do is get guests to talk about each band. So if any of you guys want to talk about one of the bands on the list, because there's certain bands on there, mainly the horrible American ones. Yeah, I think there's only what is on there. Kansas is probably on there at number 30, I think, something like that. Right down low on the list they were.
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll talk about anything.
Yeah, hey, Scott, the people are saying, we've been doing the Sunday Prog stream now. This is the Sunday Prog stream number 41. We got rid of the numbers real early on. I figured out real quick that numbers don't work on episodes. I'm an idiot. Yeah, but anyway, this is episode number 41 of the Sunday Prog stream. Just unbelievable. And we're doing it with the 4-panel. Ian says it's a good number. And honestly, we've been doing 6, Scott, right? We've been doing the 6 people up here. Do you agree with Ian? Do you like the 4 people format better? Or was it just that we had, Andy and Jim with us?
Well, there's some of that. I mean, both of these guys are interesting. That's the key, is having interesting people. You always invite interesting folks along, and that makes for a much better show. Obviously,
there we go.
I kind of like the 4 thing because it allows a little more interaction, maybe, and it allows each person to speak a little more at length. But
we can cut each other off a little bit easier too.
I can see the value of the 6 thing. It really depends on how conscious each person in the panel is that you want to keep it within a certain time limit. But it's certainly on my screen, the 4 individual faces are larger, and I like that. Because you get to see reactions and
Yeah, you see about runtime. You see, I'm of 2 minds. I got my wife right outside the door there, kind of hoping that the stream's a little short this week. And then I got my greed in what they call a mid-roll ad. And boy, oh boy, I sure don't hate those, man.
You only have to get to 8 minutes for that.
The mid-roll.
Keep them coming, man, because over 80% of views because we market these as a regular episode, right? This is not just a regular live stream. This is with a good thumbnail, a good title, clickbaity title. That's why people actually cared whether it was US versus the UK. No, it was just to get you here, people, and get you watching. And yes, watch the mid-roll.
Scott,
Absolutely.
Scott, you are a post Andy Edwards YouTuber because you're showing the internal workings. You're Brechterian. You're putting up that window to the viewer and they go, I'm seeing what he's actually thinking. You're exposing it to the audience, which I think is the way to go.
Oh yeah.
So we just got to keep talking. We need something exciting to happen.
Yeah, do it.
Well, what you need to do.
How about some nudity?
Naked butt always does it.
There we go. It's progressive rock fans. You've been holding on, guys. It's a bit boring now, and suddenly we get this.
Look at those numbers.
Bring in the bun.
Look at that. You got that. It's more of a bun than a roll, though. If you consider it. On my channel, I said that was Patrick Moraz.
Yeah. That was the band showing him the backside,
right?
That
they made him do this to try and let him to be on this album, and then they double crossed him. They said, Patrick, you could be on the next album, but you're gonna have to get your bum out on the cover. And he said, I'll do it.
I guess all those arrows and stuff are pointing the way to where Mike Pinder's the house was located.
He had the Moody Blues then, having to go from bloody to Moody Blues.
Pick up a couple of his Mellotrons before you hit the Universal studio. You know, one has to feel kind of bad for good old Patrick Moraz, right? No love with Yes whatsoever. It's just the ultimate. He was the ultimate replacement guy. He replaces Emerson in the Nice. He replaces Wakeman in Yes. He replaces Pinder in the Moody Blues. And what does he get for all that? Nothing. A big old nothing.
My favorite stuff of his is he did an album with Bill Bruford called Flags. That's just piano and drums, and it's
there were two albums. There was piano for music for piano and drums.
Music, piano, and drums.
Yeah. I love those records. I love those
both.
records.
Cool stuff. Anyway, gentlemen, any final parting words before I let the good people go? This was a lot of fun. My thanks to Jim Newstead, the great Jim Newstead. Thank you for everything, man.
Thank you.
You're a big inspiration for me, and a big reason why I started the Prog Corner was watching you and saying, wow, this guy is great. I know I can do stuff and do it even better. And Andy Edwards, man, I've been a fan for a while. You know, ever since I heard that first Frost album, I was like, holy cow, what's going on with this rhythm section? And I became instant fans of John and Andy. Anyway, an absolute pleasure having Andy Edwards on the channel. Scott from Mythologic, what's going on with you and the band? Updates on album number 3?
Still hacking away at guitar parts. I'm so particular with guitar parts, and this third part of the trilogy is much more guitar based. So I've got 5 of the 8 tracks are finished tracking, and unfortunately the one I've left to last is the 14-minute slog, which has a ton of guitars on it.
Are you paying attention that people are actually liking the first album better than the second album? I've heard that a few times. Does that impact you when you're tracking your third album?
To be honest with you, I truly feel insular in this. I was doing an interview a while back with somebody in Germany. I have a pocket of fans in Germany, of all places. And the guy was asking me, he came around and he says, why do you make these records? And I said, because I want to hear them. Literally, that's my motivation for it. So I kind of
just ask AI to do them. Ask AI.
Oh, there you go.
Can you do the third act? They can have a listen to it and get on with some reasonable stuff.
AI, please make the
third Mythologic album, please.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. I mean, if people like it, if they don't like it, I'm happy either way, because if they don't like it, they're intelligent listeners and they've made a choice for themselves. I can't tell you how many records in my lifetime I've disliked initially, and then a year or two later, or even longer, I'll come back to them and go, what was my problem? This is great. That's the great thing about prog, because it's if there's craft and care put into making an individual record, it will eventually find its audience. But what people say about it doesn't truly influence what I do going forward.
I was just wondering, because I was going to just tell Andy that the Second Rain album was better than the first one.
That's I don't know how to react to that. That's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, both really, really great records.
See, this is the thing is, Scott, if they said the second album was better than the first, you'd be going, well, what's wrong with the first album?
Exactly.
And if they said, I listened to them both and they're about the same, I suppose, you'd be going, well, what? That's make a decision. It's saying, because us musicians, we're never happy.
No.
Never happy.
No, I'm already working on writing the fourth one. So it's just the faucet's on, and I'm going to write it as long as it's coming. Nice. So yeah, that's what I need to mention premiering tonight over on Curlis Mania with Tom Curlis.
Yeah. Tim Curlis.
I taped a show with him last week. He's such a great guy. We had a great time. We did a comparison show comparing, and then there were three and Duke. And once I got into it, I mean, I'm a big fan of both of those albums, but once I really got into it and did some careful critical listening and some research about those two records, it was a lot harder for me than I thought. It ended up we both ended up making our choices by the end of the show, but those are two very well crafted albums. They each have their flaws depending on what your viewpoints are. But anyway, that was a lot of fun, and it's premiering tonight, I believe, at 9:00 Eastern.
Oh, that'll be a good one, man.
Wander over there and tune in. Yeah,
two misunderstood albums.
Very much so. Yeah. I mean, when you have a band like Genesis with such a long, rich, varied history, you're invariably going to get people landing on various sides of, whatever they've done. I like it all. I can't really name a Genesis record that I wouldn't find something to appreciate.
Yeah, there's something in all of them. Every single one. I agree. Yep. I agree. Jim, you got thoughts on that? Have you gone through Duke and then there were three?
Not yet. No, I'm working through.
Nice.
So
dude, that's fun. That's why I love your channel.
Wind and Wuthering is next.
That's my favorite. If I had to pick one, that would be it.
What I wouldn't give.
It's crazy now. People don't believe me that I've never listened to this music, but it's absolutely true. So that's the whole premise of the reason they're doing this.
Dude, we know it's obvious. You can't fool me, and you can't fool your people. Your people know you're the genuine article, and that's what's so exciting, man. Because what I wouldn't give to go back in time and hear Wind and Wuthering again for the first time.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Though, forget about it.
Yeah. So this was fun today. Thank you.
Okay.
What else, Jim? I cut you off.
No. I was going to say, no, that's all right. So you're just saying about why people like, but it's also another thing about people just discover music through my channel. And that's one of the really rewarding things to me, that something that I'm listening to the first time, maybe 75% of the audience are also listening to it for the first time. And they say, oh my God, where is it? And that's just, it's so heartening. It's such a lovely thing to be able to sort of share as a sort of a community that we're sort of doing this together.
That's so valuable, that personal connection where, you kind of, your listeners or your viewers rather, that, and I'm included in that bunch. It just really feels like it's just two friends sitting around. Have you heard this? You got to check this out. This is really cool. That's so valuable. It really is. Anyway.
Oh yeah. Return to the Earth, such a good record. Yes, you are absolutely right, Stephen. And I didn't want to cut you off, Jim, especially when we finally seem to have a good connection and you're not cutting out. So,
I've been cutting out, have I?
Just the video,
only a little bit.
Yeah, the audio's been perfect. The video's been a little dodgy, but now it's wonderful.
Audio was good all the way through, and honestly, that's the only thing that matters. I found that a very large percentage of my audience doesn't really even watch the show; they listen to it. So, good
I was going to
mics
suggest
are
something.
required.
I was going to say something to you a little while ago, actually, Scott. Have you ever thought about doing podcasts? And actually, you've got all these episodes. You've got 41 episodes now. You can just sort of upload them as a podcast.
Yeah,
it's another sort of whole audience thing you should do. You've got the content.
I really need to.
Already got it.
The channel's gotten so big. I need a social media manager. I need somebody to handle all my business. It's a one-man operation. You know how it goes. I can't even understand how Andy does everything that he does. I mean, from the thumbnails to doing the episodes and stuff. It's actually, you know, we make it look easy, guys, but it's actually a lot of work.
They haven't got a clue.
You know, it's a lot.
Being a YouTube superstar is a difficult thing.
It is. It is. You know, we just make it look so easy, Andy. You know.
And then you know, I go around the shop. I get mobbed by progressive rock fans trying to buy some biscuits in Tesco's. You know, there they all are. You know,
I had that once in Marks and Spencer.
Once?
I literally genuinely had that once in Marks and Spencer in Milton Keynes. So I went to going in there to buy a pair of trousers. The guy said, "Oh, are you Jim?" I said, "Yes." Sir. "Oh, I watch you all the time." I said, "No, this is unbelievable." It's such a weird thing.
It is a weird thing. And the first time I got recognized was after I'd only been on for like 2 months. So I was really unprepared for it. And I just think I just started laughing and ran away. So it's like, okay, I guess I got to get used to this kind of thing. It's weird. But yeah, we enjoy it because, you know, we love prog rock. And that's why we're all here every Sunday at 1 o'clock Eastern. Next Sunday, boys and girls, I'm putting together another all-star cast, and we're going to be delving into the top 10 songs from 1980. Not the first year you think of when you think of great years in prog, but as I'm digging in, man, maybe 1980 needs another look-see because there are some really, really good records that came out that year. So we're going to be doing a top 10. That's next Sunday. Anyway, I love you guys. Thank you for joining us. I'll see you next Sunday. Peace in the Middle East. Free the Ukraine and God save the king. Oh, save King Chucky. Chucky needs your saving. Yes, he does. That boy's got the cancer, so bring him to America. He can still hear. We'll lay some hands on him. Oh, we'll do some spells and incantations. Our prayer warriors are working overtime. Yes, indeed. And then we're going to dance with them snakes. Woo, yeah, we're going to dance with them snakes, and the House of Windsor will rise again. I'll see you punks next Sunday. Peace.